This M550i xDrive is the first M Performance 5 Series that has been released here in North America. And this car sits between the bonkers M5 and the reasonably sedate 540i with the 3-litre straight six. So the question really is, where does this M550i stand on that spectrum? The introduction of the M Performance line of BMW cars came about fairly recently. There was a new middle ground that had to be filled, a new niche, and that was for customers that perhaps wanted a little bit of flair of an M car, but not all of it. So the M550i, it packs a 455 horsepower, 480 pound-feet, twin-turbo, 4.4 litre V8. This is essentially the same engine that is in the M5. That one, of course, produces another 150 horsepower on top of this and 100 pound-feet more torque. So then if you were to look at the M550i strictly as that, then yes, it's an M5 Lite. It has the same four-wheel drive system, but definitely not to the same complexity. It has the same engine, but not to the most extreme output like that M5. And this V8 is a really interesting one because it's the first time that I've ever experienced a V8 where you don't necessarily feel it. Now, what do I mean by that? Of course you feel all of that power as it propels you forward. This car can do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4 seconds. That's not what I mean. With almost every car I've reviewed, when you put your foot into that accelerator, there's a rumble, there's a vibration, there's something. There's some additional message that you are putting power to the ground. But with this huge V8, there's nothing. I don't feel like there is an engine in front of me. I feel like I'm being pushed forward by some kind of external force. That is how well engineered not only that engine, but this cabin is. There's no vibration that comes through the center tunnel, nothing on the seat. It's quite extraordinary. So that's an upside to this engine. There's no NVH worries at all. Nothing. Not a single thing. But that is also part of the problem. For a performance car, I want to be able to feel and know every little intricacy of the engine that is propelling me forward. But with this, regardless of how many unpleasantries come into the cabin, I don't feel inspired by this engine. It makes a reasonable noise in comfort mode. The noise gets a little more defined in Sport and Sport Plus, but I would want it to be even louder. If I'm packing a V8, I want to hear it. I want blood pouring out of my ears, and I'm not experiencing that with this car. Let's find out what happens when you switch into Sport Plus mode, go into manual, and have some fun. There's a lot of jolting action every time that you take your foot off the throttle. The ZF8 speed is imperceptible in everyday driving, and when you are driving around using the paddles manually, it's a lot of fun. And one thing that I always hound on with cars is when they have a manual shifting mode, but they still shift up for you if you miss that shift. I despise it. If I am driving manually, I want to make the mistakes. I want to be the one that's not paying attention when the car is approaching red line. And with this car, it does that. It will hold it and wait for you to shift up. It will shift down for you automatically, even if you are in manual mode. That I can slide by. Now, I know the design of the interior and the exterior is incredibly familiar. The BMW design language carries through everything in their lineup with very few differences between each model. The design overall is an evolution rather than a revolution. The exterior design, although it's handsome, it isn't bold or exciting. But for a lot of people that are hoping to find themselves in a new 5 Series, I feel like they're going to have to do a fair bit of explaining to their friends to say, no, really, it is. It's a 2018, I promise. I can understand why people don't like that, and I know there was quite a lot of disappointment when the all-new G30 5 Series came along. It didn't look different enough to its predecessor regarding the exterior and the interior. It's BMW's continuing evolution of what they consider perfection, because everything is laid out that anybody can understand it. It's clean, it's logical. You have a touch screen down here for your climate control, your heated seats, your ventilated seats. You have iDrive 6.0 with this 5 Series, and we all know how good this is. It may very well be the best in the business. But do me a favor, click that like button if you want to see a more in-depth look of this system and everything that it can do. This widescreen display in front of us is also a touch screen and responds remarkably well. The system also has Apple CarPlay as a $750 option. It's the first Apple CarPlay system that doesn't need to be plugged in. It's a wireless system. So if your phone did have the capability to be charged wirelessly, you can throw it into the pads down here and still have your Apple CarPlay connected. Android Auto, sadly, is not available. And now it's time to address one of the most gimmicky features in the whole automotive industry: BMW's gesture control. Now, I don't really like this. I find this system more of a party trick than anything else. You've got buttons on the steering wheel that control everything you would need with the audio system. You've got the buttons down here too. And there is no accuracy with doing this. Like, I can never get it exactly where I want it to go. Noble effort in trying to stand out, BMW, but no, not for me. What isn't a gimmick though is the 360-degree camera system that this 5 Series has. I've been in quite a few cars that have 360-degree cameras, but none of them can do this. Look at this, how incredible. The only thing that would make this better is if BMW was able to add a little factor in the software so that the car displayed was the same color as your car. But this system is brilliant when you're backing out of really tight spaces, when you can't see the curbs, and you can play around with it and have a little fun too. You have 3 distinct driving modes with the M550i. You have Eco Pro, Comfort, and Sport. You also have a button right beside it called Adaptive. Now this is able to figure out what kind of situation you're in and what kind of driving mode you will want. No matter which driving mode you have this car in, the steering is always a very nice weighting. I can't say that there's a lot of feel coming out of it, but you can place the wheels easily. Sure, the steering feel isn't like the BMWs of old, but very few of them are these days. And when you're driving about every day, the seats are comfortable, they massage you, you have thigh extenders, you have lower and higher back adjustments. Stepping back a bit to talk about the V8, there's a rumble, there's a bass to it, but I find myself wanting more. This car has an M badge. I feel like that should give it more of a reason to be howling mad. And I'm afraid to say that isn't the greatest takeaway I'm going to have with this car. With the Sport Plus mode, it's the most aggressive, the most M-like mode you can get in this car. But I still find myself wanting more. Perhaps that is the point. They are saving that experience for the M5. I understand that. But if I'm paying $96,000, which is what this car costs, I want a great driving experience. And this, I can only confidently say it's a good driving experience. When you're taking this car for a regular drive on your day-to-day, it is wonderful. The seats are plush. Here we have the upgraded leather package. The suspension handles everything beautifully, and it is supremely quiet. But with an M badge, I am wanting more. So where does the M550i strike the balance on that scale between regular BMWs and fully mad M models? For me, it is edging closer to the side of the regular BMWs. Currently, you can't get a 5 Series with a V8 unless it is this M550i. Perhaps that is the justification for this model, that it is the only V8 available in a 5 Series. And if you want a V8, you want a performance car. And if you want a performance car, you want an M5. But perhaps you don't have the money that is required to own an M5. Then maybe you do look at this. Maybe you do look at this M550i as the car that will give you nearly everything that you want. So where am I holding this car? Is it a pumped up 5 Series or a detuned M5? In my opinion, it's the former for 3 reasons. 1, the M550i is an incredible daily driver. It is comfortable and refined and quiet. The ride is stable and you can get all of the tech that you can really desire. 2, the engine. Although it may be the same piece of mechanical excellence that is in the M5, there is more a desire, in my opinion, to have this kind of car with more noise and more lunacy. And finally, 3, I don't get that elation, that feeling when I approach this car like I would other M cars. It just doesn't look exciting enough. It doesn't have that flair. So the M550i, definitely not an M car, but a special BMW nonetheless.